She didn't want to go. Not tonight. Not there. Not in front of them. But the knock came anyway, loud, sharp, and final. Just after sunset, when the forest outside her window had gone quiet, like it, too, was holding its breath. Mira flinched. The spoon in her hand clattered to the floor. Her breath caught in her throat like it always did when someone came to the door. No one ever knocked. Not unless it was bad news. Not unless they needed something, or someone to laugh at. The fire in her little hearth had long gone out. Her fingers were stiff with cold. She hadn't eaten. Her stomach didn't even bother growling anymore. It had learned silence, just like the rest of her. And still, the knock came again, harder this time, like a challenge. She didn't move, didn't breathe. But the voice came anyway, rough and impatient. "Mira, you're summoned. The Alpha commands it. You're to sing at the mating ceremony." Then silence. Not just from outside the door, but inside her too. It hit her all at once. The punch in the gut, the cold flush down the spine, the sudden heat in her face, shame rising like bile. This wasn't an invitation. It was a setup. She knew it. The pack knew it. Hell, even the trees outside probably knew it. After all these years, after everything they'd done to her, now they wanted her to sing? She laughed. Just once. A sharp, bitter breath. Not because it was funny, because it was cruel. 5 years ago, they told her she was useless, a broken omega, a wolf with no howl, stripped of her voice, stripped of her bond, tossed out like garbage. And now, on the most important night of the year, when the king of the Northern Territories himself was visiting, now they wanted to hear her sing? Sure, right after they finished carving her heart out in front of everyone. Mira stepped away from the door, the floor groaning under her bare feet. The wind moaned outside the crooked little cabin, dragging dry leaves across the rotting wood. This place wasn't a home. It was a punishment, a memory box filled with shame. She bent down to pick up the spoon and froze, her hand hovering just inches from the ground. Her breath caught, because deep down, under the fear, under the fury, was something else. Something ancient, something burning. She didn't know what it was yet, but it was there, like a coal beneath ash, a spark. The sky over Black Pine Hollow was bruised purple by the time she reached the village. She stayed off the main path, kept to the trees, head down, arms crossed. She didn't want to be seen, not by anyone. The great hall was already glowing, yellow-orange light spilling through the cracks, loud voices rising up like smoke, laughter, music, footsteps stomping the wooden floors. The whole pack had gathered. Of course they had. Tonight was for celebration, for strength, for showing off to the visiting king. And Mira? She was their punchline. She slipped inside through the side entrance. Her hands trembled, hidden beneath the long sleeves of the only decent dress she owned. A plain thing, faded navy, sewn by hand. She didn't wear it for them. She wore it for her grandfather. She still remembered his voice, low and gentle, whispering stories to her as a child. "There's power in a song, little moon," he'd told her, "but not every song is meant to be loud. Some are meant to be listened to with your bones." Her song was gone now. At least, that's what they told her. She stepped into the shadows behind a tall column. She didn't dare look toward the center of the room. Not yet. But then, she felt it. Him. The Alpha King. Even without seeing him, she knew. His presence was a weight, thick, icy, still. He didn't move like the other Alphas. He didn't laugh, didn't boast, didn't smile. He watched. Mira closed her eyes. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. And then, a voice, too familiar, too cruel. "Alpha Kalen," someone called, loud enough to hush the room. "Wouldn't it be a shame to welcome the king without our pack's most unique singer?" Laughter, low and sharp, not the kind that warms a room, but the kind that slices through it. Mira's chest squeezed tight. She knew that voice. Darren. Her former mate. The one who'd broken the bond. The one who'd told her she was nothing. Now, he was calling her to the center of the hall. Not because he wanted her back. Not because he'd changed. Because he wanted to watch her fall. The Alpha smiled and nodded. "Yes. A song to honor our guest. Mira, come forward." She felt it then. The eyes. Hundreds of them. Hungry, curious, waiting to see her crumble. Her legs didn't want to move. Her throat felt like it was filled with broken glass. But something deeper than her fear made her stand. She walked out into the light, and the room held its breath. If your heart skipped, you're already part of this story. Drop A in the comments and let me know where you're listening from. She was already halfway through the trees when she thought about turning back. The wind had picked up, cold and sharp, biting at her exposed skin. Her boots slipped in the mud, roots clawing up from the forest floor like they wanted to pull her down. Every step forward felt heavier than the last, and still, she didn't stop. The torchlights of the great hall flickered in the distance. Loud voices, laughter, music, all of it growing louder, brighter, more suffocating. Mira didn't belong here. Not anymore. She hadn't for 5 years. But tonight she was being forced into their light like a wound they wanted to bleed again. She knew this wasn't about her voice. It wasn't about honor or respect. It was about spectacle, about power, and cruelty. By the time she reached the village edge, the sky had gone full dusk, burned purple and ash gray. The sun had dipped below the tree line, and mist had begun curling over the roots like breath from something dead. Mira kept her head down. She could feel eyes already watching. Children laughed behind shuttered windows. Betas in polished leathers clustered near the gates, flexing their muscles, cracking their knuckles, drunk on attention. Omega women with bright silk shawls walked in groups, linked arm in arm, all chatter and confidence. No one spoke to her, but a few of them smiled, not kindly. She kept moving. The great hall loomed before her, wide stone steps leading to an arched doorway carved with the sigils of every generation of Alpha before Kalen. Wolves, fangs, moons, symbols of strength. She'd once dreamed of walking through those doors on her mating day, hand in hand with Darren, her voice ringing out in celebration. That dream had died long ago. Her stomach turned. Still, she climbed the steps. Each bootfall echoed, sharp and lonely. The doors were open. Light and sound poured out like heat from a forge, voices layered over voices, clinking mugs, pounding drums, laughter that felt like a blade pressed to the back of her neck. She paused in the doorway, and then she stepped in. The hall was alive. Hundreds of wolves packed shoulder to shoulder. Long banquet tables stretched to either side, groaning under the weight of food, roasted meats, thick breads, herbs, and bowls of glowing fruit from the southern territories. Torches burned in iron sconces, their flames licking the ceiling in waves of orange and gold. Everywhere, there was motion, color, noise. But it was the stillness at the center of the storm that made Mira's heart stop. The Alpha King sat on a high-backed obsidian chair near the hearth. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply watched. Eyes like polished silver. She only looked at him for a second, just a flicker of a glance. But it was enough. He saw her. Not the way the others did. Not with mockery, not with judgment. He looked at her like a puzzle piece he didn't know he'd lost. And then his eyes drifted away. Mira exhaled. Her lungs felt tight, like she'd been underwater for too long. She slipped into the shadows behind a pillar, like always. Out of the way, out of the light. Just close enough to be humiliated, not close enough to be counted. Someone nearby snickered. She recognized the voice instantly. Darren. Of course he was here. Center of the room, holding court like a peacock in rut. His laugh was louder than it needed to be. His movements exaggerated. He looked bigger than she remembered. Or maybe she just felt smaller. He had a new Omega now. Lyra. Perfect Lyra. Smooth-voiced, honey-eyed, always smiling. Lyra looked up from her seat and spotted Mira in the shadows. She leaned into Darren's shoulder, whispered something. He laughed. Mira's face burned. She turned her head, looked toward the fire. Anywhere else. A sharp voice cut through the noise. Our honored Alpha King has traveled far. We must give him a welcome worthy of his presence. Alpha Kalen, standing near the high table, arms raised like he thought himself a prophet. People roared in agreement, mug sloshing, cheers echoing. A song, someone called. A gift of the pack. And then, let Mira sing. The hall fell quieter than it should have. People turned. The laughter was soft, almost polite. But the gleam in their eyes said everything. This was the joke. She was the joke. Alpha Kalen squinted toward the shadows, then smiled. Fake. Friendly. Political. Yes, he said, nodding, eager to please the king. A song from our own Omega, a rare voice. Mira, come forward. The silence after was so loud, she could hear the snap of a single log in the fire. Mira didn't move. Couldn't. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The crowd shifted. People leaned, waited, and somewhere, deep inside her chest, beneath the pain, beneath the fear, that spark from before, flickered. Just once, then again. She stood, slowly. The movement made her feel like she was wading through honey. Her heartbeat was in her ears, her hands clenched in her sleeves. She stepped out from behind the pillar. For a heartbeat. Silence. Then murmurs. Gasps. Snickers barely held behind teeth. She walked forward anyway. Every step hurt. Every step cracked something open. Memory. Pride. Humiliation. Rage. They wanted her to break. They expected it. But she didn't look at them. She looked past them, toward the fire. And beyond it, to the king. He was watching her again. Only this time, he wasn't looking through her. He was waiting. She steps onto the stage and sings. Will she fall apart? Or will her voice wake something ancient? She should have run. Every instinct screamed it. Leave. Turn around, slip out the door, vanish into the woods. But Mira kept walking. Straight down the center aisle of the great hall, through a tunnel of silence and barely concealed smirks. Her boots clicked against the stone floor like a countdown. Each step felt like a confession. Like dragging old wounds into firelight. No one reached out to stop her. But they all watched. Waiting. Like wolves at the edge of a weak deer. She didn't look at them. Not the pack elders with their fur-lined cloaks. Not the Omegas who used to braid her hair before Darren called her a shame. Not Lyra, who sat smug beside him with her perfect voice and perfectly sharpened teeth. Mira's eyes stayed on the platform. Just ahead. Just high enough to make a fall more painful. She reached it. Hesitated. There was no music. No drum beat. No soft chords to guide her voice. No one had prepared anything for her, because they didn't expect her to sing. They expected her to choke, to crumble like she did at the last gathering, to rasp out some half note before melting back into the shadows. That was the joke. That was the plan. But Mira didn't care. Not anymore. She stepped onto the stage. Wood creaked under her boots. The room felt colder now, or maybe hotter. She couldn't tell. Her breath trembled in her chest, fighting to stay still. She didn't look at Darren. Didn't need to. She knew that smirk. She knew that silence. Instead, she looked to the fire, and across from it, the king, still as stone, watching, not mocking, not amused, just present, quiet, listening. Mira inhaled. It caught halfway, her throat tight, her lungs tight. Then she exhaled, slow, and opened her mouth. The first note wasn't a note at all. It was a hum, a breath woven with memory, low and uncertain, fragile like frost. People in the front rows leaned forward, not because it was beautiful, but because it was strange. She hadn't sung this in years. Not since her grandfather whispered it to her under the pine trees back when she still believed in magic, before the fire, before the shame. The song didn't belong to this place. It belonged to the before. Mira's voice found it slowly, like fingers trailing a hidden thread in the dark. No melody they'd recognize. It didn't rise with pride or shine with celebration. It mourned. It whispered of rivers that never froze, of stars that watched but never answered, of wolves who wandered and never found their way home. And the hall stilled. No clinks of mugs, no coughs, no laughter. The torches burned lower. The air thickened. Even the Omega women, the ones who'd once called her a mute ghost, sat frozen, brows furrowed, jaws slack. Because it wasn't her voice they heard. It was something deeper, something older. Something that curled around their bones like memory, like grief, like a song they didn't know they'd forgotten. And across the room, Hale, the Alpha King. He didn't move, didn't breathe, but his hand slipped from the arm of his chair. A silver goblet fell. It struck the stone floor with a shattering clang, but Mira didn't flinch. She kept singing. Because now, she wasn't singing for them, not the pack, not Darren, not even for the king. She was singing for the ache inside her that had never healed, for the silence she'd carried like a coffin, for the little girl who used to hum under her breath while braiding dried flowers into her hair, dreaming someone would hear her. She hit the final note, soft, breaking, and let it go. Silence followed, but not the mocking kind, not this time. This silence felt like reverence. Like the kind of quiet you get when the storm passes and no one dares move yet. She opened her eyes. The king was standing, his gaze, silver fire, locked on hers. Everyone else vanished in the space between that look. She took a breath, shaky, real, her voice gone again, but not because it failed, because it had given all it had to give, and still, he watched, unblinking, unmoving. The flame light painted sharp lines down his face. Something in him cracked. Mira could see it in the way his fists curled at his sides, the way his chest rose, then held. He stepped forward, just once. A single boot on stone. It echoed louder than any applause. The hall didn't know what to do. Even Darren, especially Darren, sat frozen. Hale didn't stop. He walked, each step deliberate, each footfall a thunderclap in the bones of everyone watching. He stopped at the edge of the platform, looked up at her, voice low, quiet enough that only she could hear it. What was that song? And for the first time since she stood on that stage, Mira felt something sharp slice through the fear, recognition, like something ancient had just opened its eyes. The others would call it madness, or magic, or some forgotten curse, but she felt it in her bones. Something had changed. Something had hurt her. And whatever happened next, it wouldn't let go. He's heard that song before. Not in this lifetime, but in blood, in legend, in soul, and now that it's found him again, he'll never let it go. The moment stretched too long. Mira didn't move. Neither did he. The Alpha King stood at the base of the platform like a creature carved from mountain stone, massive, still, but undeniably alive. Something ancient pulsed just beneath his skin, and his eyes, they weren't just looking at her. They were seeing her. Every part. Not the broken girl in gray wool. Not the ghost that haunted the village edge. Not the joke, but something else. Something older. He spoke again. Quiet. Controlled. But that control was wearing thin. What was that song? Mira's voice didn't come right away. She didn't know what to say. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her pulse roared in her ears. She wanted to lie, to say it was nothing, a scrap of an old lullaby, something from childhood, something forgettable. But she couldn't, so she said the truth. My grandfather taught it to me. That caught him. His eyes sharpened, his jaw tightened. He stepped up onto the stage, slow, purposeful. The crowd barely breathed. Even the fire seemed to dim, holding its flicker like it too was waiting. Mira's heart slammed against her ribs. She'd never been this close to him. He smelled like snowmelt and pine and iron, and something darker, something heavy and buried, like rain about to fall after years of drought. He didn't touch her, but he didn't need to. The air between them cracked with weight, with meaning. That song, he said, voice low, rough, like gravel underfoot, has not been sung in over 500 years. Mira's breath caught. She blinked, but Hale wasn't finished. It's not a song, he continued. It's a call, a blood-deep bond ritual. It doesn't just carry sound, it carries soul. The hall didn't understand, but Mira did, because she felt it. She felt it the second she started singing, that invisible thread snapping tight in her chest, tugging her forward, filling her with a weight that wasn't pain, but wasn't comfort either. A pull. A return. He looked at her like someone just solved the riddle of his life. Then, his voice changed. Softer. Barely audible. Who are you? Not a challenge. A plea. Like he was asking himself the same question. She stared at him, and without thinking, without planning, she answered, I don't know anymore. Something broke in him then. A single muscle ticked in his jaw, and his breath caught, not with anger, but something else. Recognition, pain, longing. Then, in front of the entire room, before the Alpha of Ashenclaw, the elders, the mate who'd discarded her, the wolves who called her useless, Hale dropped to one knee. Gasps. Movement rippled across the hall like shockwaves in water. Even Alpha Kalen stood, startled, his beta guards tensed. But the king didn't care. He didn't even blink. He just lowered his head and whispered a word. Mate. The silence after was devastating. A stillness so thick Mira could feel her own blood moving through her veins. She swayed slightly on her feet. The stage tilted. Reality cracked. Mate. The word wasn't just a declaration. It was a claim. A vow written in instinct and sealed by fate. And the weight of it crushed everything else. Mira wasn't breathing. She couldn't. Somewhere in the crowd she heard a sharp sound. Darren's voice. Disbelieving. Choked. No, that's not possible. But no one was listening to him now. Not anymore. Because the king wasn't moving. He wasn't speaking. He was just looking at her like she'd pulled him out of a 1,000-year storm and handed him the sun. Mira didn't know what to do. Her body felt foreign. Her heart too loud. She wanted to run. She wanted to fall into him. She wanted to disappear and be seen, all at once. Hale stood again. His height dwarfed hers, easily a foot or more. His shoulders wide enough to block the firelight. His presence wrapped around her like pressure. He leaned down, just a little, just enough for no one else to hear. I didn't come here for a mate. A pause. But I'm not leaving without you. Mira flinched. Her breath hitched. The room spun a little. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Not after everything. Not after being told she was worthless, broken, forgotten. Not after years of silence. She stared at him, at the raw truth in his eyes, and something inside her, something old and quiet and buried under frost and fear, woke up. He extended his hand, big, calloused, still trembling, but not from fear, from restraint. Mira looked at it, looked at him, and said nothing. Not yet. The crowd didn't move, not even to breathe, and high above the moon slipped out from behind the clouds, spilling silver light through the stained glass window overhead. It touched her first, then him, then both. The whole room waited for her answer, but she wasn't ready to give one yet, not until she understood what she was giving. She didn't take his hand. She didn't walk away. She stood there, caught between the shame of who she'd been and the storm of what she might become. But the thread between them? It didn't loosen, not even a little. He knew that song. Not from this life, but from blood, from legend, from soul. And now that it had found him again, he wouldn't let it go. He didn't move, not until she blinked. Not until her fingers, numb and stiff from holding still too long, twitched ever so slightly at her side. Then the king straightened, and the room exhaled. No one spoke. Not yet, not after what they'd just seen. A broken Omega had sung a song no one remembered, and the Alpha King had dropped to a knee and called her mate. Nothing about this night was normal anymore. But Mira, she wasn't thinking about the crowd. She wasn't thinking about Darren's white-knuckled fists. She wasn't even thinking about the word mate. She was thinking about the sound in the back of her skull, the pull in her chest, the fire in her blood. Something had clicked inside her. She didn't know what it was yet, but it was old, deep, not hers alone. It had teeth. Hale stepped back, not far, just enough to let her breathe. His eyes never left her face. And when he spoke again, his voice was softer, quieter than before, but no less dangerous. Come with me. Tonight. He didn't say please. He didn't have to. It wasn't a command, it was something else. An instinct calling out to another. A bond asking to be answered. Mira looked at the crowd. At the stunned faces, the open mouths, at Alpha Kalen, who looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him, and then at Darren, his face pale, jaw locked, rage building just beneath the surface, and she knew. If she said yes now, she'd never come back. Not as the broken girl, not as the reject. She'd return, maybe, but not as someone they could shame. That part of her would die the moment she took that step. She whispered, then stopped. Because something inside her said, don't answer here. Not in this room. Not surrounded by wolves who only know your weakness. She turned back to the king and met his gaze, not as prey, not as a girl, as herself. She shook her head, just once, then said clearly, not here. Hale didn't argue. He nodded, stepped aside, and waited. Because he knew what she was really saying. Not in front of them, not as their performance. This bond was hers, not a spectacle, not a trophy. She stepped down from the stage, past Darren, who flinched when she met his eyes. She didn't look at Lara. Didn't need to. They didn't exist in her story anymore. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked, and the king followed. The hall erupted as the doors closed behind them. Dozens of voices at once. Confusion, fear, anger, politics. The kind of noise that meant the story had already changed and no one knew how to control it. But Mira and Hale? They didn't hear it. They were already gone. Outside, the air was sharp with frost. The moon rode high above the trees, full, wide, blinding white. Mira inhaled like she hadn't in years. Not carefully, but deep. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. She turned toward him, finally looked. All of him. Not the legend, not the throne, not the silence. The man. He looked at her like she was a map, one he'd been searching for his entire life. "You felt it too," he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, once, and the truth hung between them, heavy, undeniable. He closed the distance. Not fast, careful. His hand rose, then stopped just before her cheek, not touching, but close enough she could feel the warmth of him. "I need to explain what this is," he said. "Because if I don't, you'll think you're being pulled into something you didn't choose." Her breath shook. "Am I not?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No." Then softer. "You called me." Not the other way around. Mira stared at him. Her heart wasn't just pounding, it was burning. Not with fear, with recognition. "What do you mean?" she whispered. His hand finally touched her cheek. Barely there, just a graze, but her whole body reacted. Heat unfurled from the center of her chest like fire set loose in her veins. "The song you sang," he said. "It wasn't just music. It's ancient. Older than packs. Older than thrones." His voice dropped lower. "It's called the Animore. The Soul Summon." She frowned. "I've never heard that name." "You wouldn't have," he said. "It was forbidden. Erased." "Why?" "Because it does what nothing else can." He leaned closer. "It finds your missing half." Silence. Even the wind stopped. Mira's heart. No. It wasn't her heart anymore. It was their heart. 2 beats, now sinking. "I didn't come here to find a mate," he said again, his voice raw. "I came to test this pack, to gauge their strength. That's it." He looked at her, and for the first time, he looked afraid. "But then you sang." And Mira understood. Because now she was afraid too. Afraid of what this meant. Afraid of what she was to him. Afraid of what she'd already become. He dropped his hand, stepped back. But he couldn't hide it. His voice might have been steady, but his eyes, they were begging. Not for power, not for obedience, for her. She didn't speak. She couldn't. There were no words for this. Only truth. Only fire. Only fate. The bond hadn't just formed, it had awakened. And it wasn't done yet. The night around them held still, waiting for her choice. But the bond wasn't waiting. It was already moving. Inside them both. Pulling, tightening, sinking in. It would only get stronger from here. And no matter what she chose next, it had already begun. The wind howled outside the mountain pass, thick with snow and silence. And Mira had never been so warm. She stood at the edge of a massive window carved directly into the stone, an arch open to the sky. Frost crusted the outer edge, but inside, the hearth burned high behind her. She should have been cold. She wasn't. The mountain fortress was nothing like the village. There were no cramped corners, no damp walls, no rotting floorboards. Here, space stretched in every direction, tall ceilings, wide archways, polished stone floors that caught the firelight like glass. It should have felt intimidating. Instead, it felt safe. It had only been a day. One night since she left the Ashenclaw pack. One night since the word mate shattered the rules of her life. One night since Hale took her from a stage meant to humiliate her and placed her in the heart of his world. She hadn't slept, not because she was scared, but because her mind wouldn't quiet. It replayed the song, the moment, the sound of his voice when he said, "You called me." What did that mean? How could a broken, forgotten Omega reach across a bloodline and wake something so powerful? How could this place, a fortress high above the clouds, be hers? It didn't feel real. Not yet. Behind her, the fire cracked. She didn't turn. She knew it was him. The way his presence filled the room was unmistakable. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. "I thought this would feel like a cage," she said quietly. "Being here. With you." Her voice was steady, surprising even herself. "But it doesn't." She turned. Hale stood barefoot on the stone, dressed in nothing but black linen pants and a loose long-sleeved shirt. He looked more human like this, almost. But the stillness in him, the watching, never left. He nodded once. "I know." They'd barely spoken since arriving, not because they avoided each other, but because something bigger than words hung between them, a bond, a thread, still tightening. He motioned toward the seat across from the fire. She moved, sat. He sat too. They were only a few feet apart, but it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. "I don't understand any of this," she said. "The song. The bond. Why now?" Hale rested his forearms on his knees. The firelight danced across his face. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, silver eyes darkening in the shadows. His voice was low. Careful. "Neither did I. Not for a long time." He paused. Then, "Would you like to hear the truth?" Mira swallowed, nodded. "The first king in my bloodline," he said, "was a shifter like the rest of us. But unlike the others, he wasn't born with a complete soul." Mira blinked. He continued. "The moon spirit gave him power, and a curse. His strength would grow, but so would his loneliness. The more control he had, the more isolated he became. Until he found his other half." He looked directly at her. His mate. Mira's throat tightened. She said nothing. "Every king after him inherited the same blessing and the same curse. We're only whole when we find the one who carries the rest of us. Without that bond, our wolves go cold, numb, distant." His voice dropped lower. "I've ruled for 10 years. I've seen wars. I've won every challenge placed before me. And I've felt nothing." The silence between them stretched long and deep. Hale's eyes never left hers. Then he said, "Until you sang." Mira closed her eyes. Because hearing it, really hearing it, shook her. The girl they called broken had carried a power no one understood. Not even her. She opened her eyes again and asked, "But how could I have that song?" He shook his head. "Your grandfather knew it. That means your blood remembers. It passed through generations, waiting, until someone carried it again." He leaned forward, and when he spoke this time, it wasn't just truth. It was reverence. "You didn't lose your voice, Mira. You were tuned differently, not for them. For me." Tears rose fast, sharp, hot. She blinked them away, but he saw them and didn't look away. The fire cracked again. The wind howled at the window arch. And still, this space between them didn't break. "I don't know how to be what you need," she whispered. Her voice was raw, real, honest. "I don't know how to be a queen." He smiled, soft, the kind of smile that meant something. "I don't need a queen," he said. "I need my soul back." Silence. Then he stood, crossed the space between them, kneeling again. This time, not before a crowd, not before a throne, just for her. He reached up, cradled the side of her face with a tenderness that unraveled everything inside her. "I don't want to change you," he said. "I want to know you." She leaned into his touch, not because she was ready, but because she wanted to be. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was carrying her pain alone, because he had it too. He just carried it differently. Neither of them moved for a long time. There was no kiss, no claim, just breath, and warmth, and quiet understanding. But deep beneath that moment, the bond stirred again. Stronger, hungrier, waiting. Whatever was awakening between them, it wasn't done, not even close. The garden was unlike anything she'd ever seen. It was small, tucked inside a glass-walled conservatory near the eastern wing of the mountain keep. Wildflowers, fanged orchids, silver-leaf vines that curled upward toward warm lantern light, and the scent, earth after rain, stone warmed by sun, pine sap, memory and magic, braided together. Mira stood in the center, her hands buried in dark soil, dirt under her nails, dirt on her palms, and for the first time since she was a child, it didn't feel like shame. It felt like home. She didn't hear Hale walk in, but she felt him. The bond recognized him now before her eyes or ears ever did. She didn't turn, not right away. She just spoke. "I used to hide in the woods outside my village, collect roots, flowers, dead bark. Everyone said I was wasting time." She lifted her hand, a small purple bloom between her fingers. "But things grow in silence." His voice was behind her, low, steady. "That's what I felt in your song." She smiled, small, sad. Everyone else heard a weakness. Everyone else was wrong. She turned to face him. He wasn't dressed like a king today, just black trousers and a simple tunic. Sleeves rolled up, no rings, no crest, no crown, and yet he looked like power, the kind that didn't need to be announced, the kind you felt. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. He raised a brow. "You thought I'd be cruel?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Not cruel, but unreachable." Hale took a step forward. "You didn't reach me. You woke me." Something passed between them then. No words, just energy, the tether, that invisible thread, now taut, strong, unbreakable. Mira stepped aside and walked to a worn bench near the back of the garden. He followed, sat beside her. The quiet stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was full, like the silence after thunder. "I've been afraid of this bond," she said. "I was told I was too broken to be anyone's mate, and now I'm yours." She looked at him, not with fear, but with honesty. "That terrifies me more than being alone." He looked at her like she'd just laid her soul in his hands, because she had, and he didn't flinch. He just said, "Then let it terrify us together." She stared at him, a breath caught in her chest, and then she laughed, not bitter, not broken, light, real, soft. It startled her more than him. "I haven't done that in years," she whispered. "Good. Do it more." The bond pulsed again, stronger now, not demanding, not devouring, but calling, inviting. Mira stood, pacing. Her fingers brushed her throat. Her voice still wasn't perfect, still fragile, but she could feel it under her skin now, alive, like it had never been lost, just waiting. "I want to try something," she said. Hale stood too, eyes alert. "Anything." She moved to the center of the garden, closed her eyes, and began to hum. Not loud, not beautiful, just true. The song curled through the air like smoke, like light, like something half-remembered. A tune with no words, no structure, just feeling. It echoed off the glass walls. It moved through soil and bloom and wind. And he felt it, not just in his ears, in his chest. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She just adjusted, breathed through it, and kept going. When she opened her eyes, he was standing still, not smiling, not shocked, but changed. "You're singing to the bond," he said. Not a question, a truth. Mira stepped forward. The space between them crackled. The tether wasn't a thread anymore. It was a chain, lit from within. "I'm not broken," she whispered. "No," he said. "You were always meant to break them." She reached for his hand. He took it. No hesitation. His fingers wrapped around hers like he'd done it 1,000 times before, like they were built to. No kiss, no vow, not yet, but something sealed itself in that garden. Not just a bond, a decision. She was done running from her power, from her voice, from him. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it from the shadows. She'd stand in the light, even if it burned, and somewhere deep in her chest, a melody began to build again. Not the soul call, not the summon. Something new. Something hers. Something rising. The wind smelled like pine and memory. The ashen claw gates hadn't changed. Still tall, still scarred, still wrapped in ivy and dust and the weight of unspoken history. Mira sat astride a white-gray wolf mare, her posture straight, her jaw set. Hale rode beside her, silent, a storm wrapped in black leather and stillness. Behind them, silence. Before them, the pack, gathered, waiting, bowing. Alpha Kalen stood at the front, hands folded behind his back, chin dipped just slightly. Not in pride, in submission. Mira didn't flinch, didn't tremble. She hadn't been here since the night they tore her apart. Now they watched her return, not limping, not crawling, but beside a king. The gates creaked open, the pack parted. No howls, no cheers. Only hush, the kind that came when people couldn't figure out if they were witnessing salvation or judgment. She dismounted first, not because she had to, because she chose to. Her boots hit the dirt, and the sound seemed louder than it should have. Her gray cloak shifted in the breeze, trimmed in silver and threaded with sigils they didn't recognize, marks of the northern mountain line. Her hair was braided back. Her eyes, unapologetically steady. Hale dismounted behind her. The crowd didn't dare look at him for long. Even now they knew power when it stood in front of them. But it wasn't him they feared. Not anymore. It was her. She walked through them slowly. Each step pulled a thread from memory. The girl who'd stood in this clearing years ago, shaking, broken, voice cracked and shamed in front of all of them. Now she walked with her shoulders back, hands relaxed, unafraid. Eyes followed her, mouths whispered, and still she moved. Until she saw him. Darren. He stood near the back. Not with the alphas, not with the proud. But near the edge of the gathering, his face looked hollow, as if the color had been drained from it. He didn't wear the smug grin anymore, didn't look like the golden air. He looked like a ghost. And next to him, Lyra. Head bowed, eyes downcast. No laughter now, no venom, just fear. Mira stopped. She didn't walk toward him. She didn't speak. She just let her gaze settle on him. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't rage. It was pity. And that broke him more than a slap would have. Darren looked away, couldn't meet her eyes, couldn't bear the weight of being seen by someone who had outgrown him in every possible way. Hale stepped to her side, but he didn't speak, didn't touch her. He let her own presence speak for itself. Alpha Kalen cleared his throat, attempted formality. "My king, Lady Mira." He paused, visibly swallowing his pride. "We welcome you. You honor us with your return." Mira turned her head slowly, eyes sharp, cold, controlled. "No, I don't." The words struck like frost. "I'm not here for honor. I'm not here for your approval." Her voice didn't shake. It filled the space, not loud, but undeniable. Kalen lowered his eyes. There was nothing he could say. Mira looked at the crowd, at the wolves who once laughed, once turned away, once called her a shadow. None of them spoke now. "You summoned me to humiliate me," she said, clear and calm. "You mocked my voice, my purpose, my blood." She looked around, eyes like a blade pulled from the sheath. "You told me I was broken." A beat, then softer. "You were wrong." No one dared move. Even the wind seemed to wait for her next breath. "I found my voice," she said. "You just couldn't hear it." Hale finally stepped forward. His presence rolled through the crowd like thunder under skin. He didn't need to raise his voice. "This Omega," he said, pointing not at Mira, but to the symbol she had become, "is not yours anymore. You lost her. You threw her away." He turned. His eyes burned silver. "And I'm here to make sure you never forget that mistake." The pack bowed. Every single one. Not out of respect, out of instinct, out of fear, out of awe. Mira stepped back beside him. Her cloak caught the wind. She didn't glance back. Not at Darren, not at Kalen, not at any of them. Hale offered his hand. This time, she took it. They mounted, turned, and the gates of Ashenclaw closed behind them like the lid of a casket. Mira didn't cry, didn't shake. She rode tall, eyes on the horizon. And this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. What they saw was a wolf they'd tried to bury. What they couldn't see was what she'd become now that her soul had a home. And the fire of that truth would burn long after she left. She wasn't going back to the mountain. She was going forward, to the bond, to the final truth, to whatever waited beneath the full moon, when the last note would finally be sung. Snow fell in slow spirals outside the high windows. Mira stood barefoot on the stone floor, a long gown of midnight silk clinging to her skin like second breath. Her fingers trembled, not with fear this time, but something deeper. Anticipation. The moon was full, so full it looked too big, too close. The silver light poured over the balcony, bathing the chamber in pale blue shadows. This was where it would happen. The final bond. Not a ceremony, not tradition. A vow made under starlight, skin, and soul. Hale was already there. No crown, no armor. Just him, and that look in his eyes. Like she was the missing verse in a song he'd been humming his entire life. They hadn't spoken since they left Ashenclaw. There had been nothing to say, only this moment. He stepped toward her, slow, barefoot, controlled. His body coiled like every part of him was holding back a storm that could level mountains. But his voice, It was soft, almost reverent. "You're sure?" Mira didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. She reached out, took his hand, and placed it flat against her chest, right over her heart. It beat wild, alive, open. "It's always been yes," she whispered. He breathed in like he was catching it, holding it. She didn't know what this part would feel like. The moment the bond finalized, the magic sealed, she expected fire, electricity, something violent. But when his hands moved to cup her face, it was quiet, deep, like the hush between heartbeats, like peace. His forehead pressed to hers, his breath warm on her lips, and then, just once, he spoke the binding word, "Mine." The magic hit like a slow wave, not crashing, not flooding, just rising. Mira gasped. Her knees buckled, but he held her. The tether between them, no longer a thread, it became a root, twisting through her bones, her blood, her memories. It was all there. The broken girl, the hush of exile, the night she sang without knowing why, the fire she'd buried so deep it almost died. And now, this man, this bond, this beginning. She felt him inside it, his loneliness, his hunger, his restraint, and his absolute aching awe. The bond didn't erase her. It revealed her. When it settled, when the light in her chest stopped pulsing, when she could breathe again, he was still there. Hands holding her face like she was the last living flame in a frozen world. And she laughed. Not the hollow kind, the kind that shook her shoulders, broke tears out of her eyes, the kind that said, "I made it." Hale pulled back just enough to look at her, his voice low, hoarse. "What are you thinking?" She touched his chest, fingers spreading over the beat of his heart, her voice soft. "That I thought I was singing for myself that night." A pause. "But maybe I was singing for you." He kissed her, not rushed, not claiming, but true. And when it broke, she stepped back, walked out onto the balcony, into the cold, bare feet on frost-dusted stone, white snow catching in her dark hair. The stars above looked close enough to touch, and from deep in her chest, she sang, no fear this time, no hiding. Her voice rose into the night. Not loud, but full, strong, cracked in places, but hers. The song didn't summon, it didn't call, it claimed. Hale stepped beside her, watching the way the snow paused in the air, like the world itself was listening. Her song wrapped around the tower, down into the valley, into the bones of the mountain, and across the world. Wherever lonely wolves wandered, that voice carried, no longer a ghost, no longer a joke. She was the queen of the soul, and every note she sang now carved her legend in stone, and somewhere, in the place where all old stories go, a new one began to write itself, one that started with silence and ended with song.